Welcome back to the Indiewood Podcast, the podcast about making independent film and the many hats we have to wear in order to get those films made. With me this month, I have the wonderful, the talented Gene Gallerano. Welcome back for another episode 2 specifically.
Thank you.
Last week we talked about your journey throughout your entire career, and we landed on this idea of opportunity and, being courageous enough to take the opportunity. You talked about a film that you made about your mentor, Austin Pendleton. Austin Pendleton.
AP.
Yeah. And how you created this amazing documentary feature that got rejected from every film festival you submitted to. How many film festivals did you submit to?
I don't know, a lot though. I mean, like probably 50.
Okay, that is a lot. Yeah.
We might have gotten into something that was like online, like that my dad ran or something.
Yeah. He made a film festival.
But you don't, but you don't like. Then I was, then it's like that whole thing of, do we let it play that and the premiere?
The Ohio Dad Film Festival.
Yeah, Ohio for Dads.
Yeah. Well, you had that film and you did a creative pivot where you looked at it and you were like, this just isn't working. And so you cut it down into a short film, and then that got into Tribeca, which is awesome. You went from, Dads for Ohio Film Festival to Tribeca in New York, which is a huge feat. So congrats on that. But I want to talk a little bit about that creative pivot, because when we were talking in prep for this episode, or for this series, for this podcast, you mentioned something like finding not only the right festival, but the right way to pitch a film. Because every film festival is looking for something unique for their own, and it could change from year to year. But also every project wants to be something that you may not know until you actually make the project. For example, starring Austin Pendleton, there we go. That film wanted to be a short, So I wanted to talk to you about your experiences having this creative pivot. So let's start with to kind of recap, starring Austin Pendleton. And tell me about like that moment where you were like, I have to change what this is. How did that come about, and how did that feel? Because sometimes it feels a little bit like you're cutting off a part of yourself because you're changing something you've created, and you left a lot of material on the floor because you made it a short film. So how do you come to that decision, and how do you deal with that fallout?
You gauge your levels of depression on how much you've hit your head against the wall, and then you decide, do I have it in me to go one more time and see if someone's going to throw out a mat before I hit the wall? Yeah, no, that was, I mean, look, we made a feature. It had some of the most amazing actors of all time saying amazing, beautiful, profound things about this man, about the arts, about a life in the arts, about careers, about what it took. They were great also because they weren't talking about themselves. They were talking about this figure that they all loved. And so we built this thing, and ultimately it was, I think there is merit to the feature. I think like a lot of people who are studying acting and trying to understand the arts in that kind of way would find a lot of value in it. But I think for like festivals in particular, which is a whole different beast, it's not an educational forum in a lot of ways. It's not like a university, college university library, that you go study Udo Hagen and starring Austin Pendleton. If you're granted the time, which of course we were, because when you're making like movies and projects, it's like finding an apartment. You got space, money, and location, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't have money, you got time. And that's the big thing that you're going to have, is you're going to give yourself time, because you're going to have everybody working for free, basically. And so, with something like that, it was like I knew there was something there. I just didn't know what it was. And so I think a lot of people might have quit on it and been like, I guess that's it. Let's put it on YouTube or whatever. And I was like, it's too good to do that. We just haven't figured out what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it came. I think it was just me being stubborn me wanting it badly enough, me feeling an obligation to like our team and David, my co-director, and to Austin, who had opened up so much of himself and his, people weren't going to bat and doing interviews for this movie because of me. They were doing it because of their love for Austin.
Mm.
And so I felt a real responsibility to all of them as well. And I mean, I've been there on the other end where I've made movies and you know, you can't crack it and you feel that obligation. And sometimes being like a director can be the loneliest job on the planet, especially in the indie realm, because there's
Yeah.
a moment on every movie where you are all alone with it and you're like, if I quit right now, this movie dies. Like,
Yeah.
I am the only thing keeping it alive at this moment. And so you have to check in with yourself and say, like, what's the purpose of it? What is this? And for us, a big purpose was to share Austin's story and share the values and the kind of themes and the ideas beneath it, because it wasn't about a character actor. It's how you have a career in the arts. It was about how you approach the world as an artist, about how you approach the arts. And so at the same time, I'm like dealing with this material that is telling me like, you can't give up, you can't give up, you have to keep going,
Yeah.
you have to keep finding a
Okay.
way. And this is a man I love. Like he put me in the first big play I ever did in New York, and I studied with him forever, and I was in a movie with him, and then he put me in the biggest play I was ever in New York. And like, I loved this man, I
Mm-hmm.
loved him. I felt a big responsibility, and I felt a responsibility to the project. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than going out on the limb for your projects in an indie capacity on an indie film and telling everybody, all your loved ones, all your friends, all your community, I'm making this movie, I'm making this movie. And you make the movie, and then it fucking falls to the saddest death of all time. And people are like, what happened to your movie? And you're like, I
Something.
can't, I
Yeah.
don't know, I can't, I don't know if I'm a fraud, it's a disaster, I don't know, I'm fucking. So I didn't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I had something. And so I don't know. I was like, I can't quit on this.
Was it instinctual? Like, did you feel that? I guess on some level it was instinctual because you had this emotional history with Austin, and you needed to get that story out, and you saw all those informational tidbits that everyone provided about him and about the arts. So I feel like on some level, on a gut feeling, you knew that that needed to be told. But from a technical standpoint, if you could think back, was it like just some moments too long? Was there a double beat that you needed to delete? Like what stuff ended up on the floor? Is it
It,
something you develop over time as like an instinctual thing?
Maybe. I mean, I hadn't really
Yeah.
made a documentary, so I didn't know. I had no idea about how you do it. I just knew that there were some scenes that were awesome
Yeah.
and really fun and played and
Mm-hmm.
popped. And I was like, that's exciting. And that's like an emotional scene. And that's like about where Philip Seymour Hoffman's like, this is the discovery of Philip Seymour Hoffman and like, what an influential figure. And that's like a gem.
Yeah.
That's something that everybody like, that's Philip Seymour Hoffman's like a family favorite. Me and my sisters and my mom quote every movie he's ever been in. Like, I was like, this makes sense to me. This needs to be there. But maybe this thing on like going down into 17 Broadway shows, and it's like meandering, and maybe it's just more interesting to a very small amount of people.
Yeah.
I think you do have to hone that. I think you do know it. I mean, something I've learned from working with really awesome filmmakers is there is a big instinctual part of it. There's a part of it that's their voice that comes through, and that's what they're interested in. I think I've learned recently, like, I care a lot less about exposition. I care about feeling, like, especially when you're shooting like documentary stuff. I'm like, give me the feeling, don't give me the info. That's probably the same in narrative fiction. Like, you have to break out some stuff so that people can go on the ride, but they don't go on the ride for information.
Yeah.
They don't care about every step of the way as long as it's exciting and electric. They'll go with you. They'll when you break down some awesome movies, you're like, they don't give you anything. You have no
You
idea
just
who any
feel.
of these people
Yeah.
are, but you
Yeah.
feel them. You know who they are immediately.
Yeah.
So I think it is like, I think it's a combo of that. I think there's a stubbornness just as an artist, and for all my own personal baggage of like not wanting to let some great idea go, because I knew it was a great idea and I knew I had what I had. I just didn't know how to tell it. I think we had the luxury of and very few people have this. A lot of indie people do because, like I said, time. You make something, it takes a certain amount of time. You know, that took like 6 years
Mm-hmm.
maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and to get to the feature film, and then you submit it to these festivals and you wait for a certain amount of months. So you stop thinking about it. You think about like, oh, what am I gonna look like at Sundance and
Yeah.
Cannes and all that. Get
Yeah.
my white linens cleaned, get some white linens. Um, but it like lets you stop thinking about it. You're not getting caught in the details of
Yeah.
everything. You're not holding on to all your darlings, you know, that you were fighting for. You don't even remember what half of them were at that point. And so then you relook at the movie, and I was like, I think it was just a gut check thing. And I
Yeah.
said, okay, it's not working. Let me look at it and see what they might be seeing. And I think if you have the luxury of that, like when you write a script, some playwright told me like he loves to write a draft and throw it into a drawer for 3 months and not look at it and pull it out because then he can see what's actually there.
Yeah.
And
I feel like that's where a lot of my work pops is I write it, I rewrite it, I do 5 drafts of it, and then I just let it go. Like it just disappears from my life. And then when I come back to it, I reread it, I'm like, oh, that's right, I wrote that. And then I have to go back and kind of cut things out. And honestly, some of these projects took a long time to get to the
hmm
point where I'm like, that scene doesn't belong there.
hmm
That scene is different. That scene wants to be something else.
yeah,
Um,
or like Rick Pollitt and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. He's like, I'm just waiting for that click. And you gotta allow it the time to like find its way into your system
mhm,
and your soul and let go of certain things and just see what the ahas, the clicks are.
yeah.
And I think that's important. And a lot of times you don't have the luxury of time, and nor maybe you don't want to face the honesty of it. I don't know. It's also painful. Like, what if you wrote a piece of shit? Like, that's also tough.
True.
I've written
True,
some
true, true.
garbage.
Same.
I
Yeah.
made some garbage, you know?
Yeah. There are some films that I never finished editing because I saw it and I was like, this, I had that gut check. I was like, this isn't worth my time. I'm not saying anything. I've learned from this. This is a nugget for me, but this doesn't belong in the world.
Yeah, totally.
And then it's just sitting on a hard drive somewhere. There's a shot that maybe might end up in my reel, but the real thing, just isn't going to be out in the world. Um,
I think, listen, I think that's also a really good problem to have.
yeah.
I think you're really lucky if you have a body of work that is varied. And sometimes you took the risk and it didn't work. I mean, if the biggest stars on the planet can have big bombs, so can we. I
Yeah.
mean, it'd be nice to have big bombs. Like, I do believe that you need to, you know, you hear a lot of people say, like, I learned the most from my failures. Well, those were typically successful people who are talking about learning the most from their failures. I
Hmm.
do believe that I'm a firm believer you need success to learn from as well.
True.
Like, I think it's you learn just as much from succeeding, and having that and being like, okay, I can trust in something. Arts are real difficult. You know, you have to gut check yourself a lot. Like, and say like, is this real? Is this not? You know, and it's like talk about killing your darlings, and it's a really difficult people. The best in the business can do it, and they're ruthless, and they're just like, it's
Yeah.
gone
Yeah.
out.
It's interesting you mention successes and failures because I feel like if you can do one film or one project, a play, for example, or a book, whatever it may be, and it's successful, and then you go, cool, I'm going to do the exact same thing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be successful.
hmm
It could be the exact same film, just different, better, whatever, and it could fail because, like you said, like there's nothing clear about the arts. It's such a ethereal art form that needs instinct, I think, to function. You know, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, we got AI for that. Rinse, repeat.
Right, exactly. Make me sequel of popular movie B.
Yeah, starring
Done.
Austin, still starring Austin Pendleton.
Right. Well,
uh,
so you've pivoted with that, and you've learned a lot from that film starring Austin Pendleton. How have your recent projects been affected by that growth? Like, have you, as a director, because you're directing a couple films and you're producing a
yeah,
couple more
yeah.
documentaries and features, how have you brought those lessons into these current projects? Are you now kind of setting up yourself for that moment where you're going to be like, here's the knife here's the scalpel, like let's get to cutting? Or are you waiting for those moments to come before you start to kind of, think about where you're going to cut?
I just did a big tear of producing for what I truly think are like some of the best documentary filmmakers on the planet. And what like I think no matter what field, if you get to work with master craftspeople and you are an intelligent human being, you will observe it, you'll take in as much as possible. I think if you do that, which you should do no matter what
Mhm.
aspect of life, you should always be doing that. But I think if then you have any kind of talent of your own, you're gonna take all of that and you're gonna say, what's mine? And so um now I'm directing yeah, like all the I'm not just producing anything, I'm just directing all the projects that I have. And what's been really exciting for me is seeing mine like voice and North Star bubble up and saying like, oh cool, this is what that person would do. I'm gonna do this.
Mhm.
But I know like again, when you work with master craftspeople, um you know what excellence is and you know what it isn't. And so I think like a very beautiful thing is where I used to force things in the past. Now I'm like, it's not worth it. This isn't gonna work. Let's not waste our time. Let's just wait and like we'll find out what it is. Sometimes you gotta muscle it through, you know, but I think that's something that's been interesting. And like I come from you know, as a kid I would watch movies and dream about them, and I love movies. Like it's one of the best places in the world is going to a movie theater, getting lost in those stories.
Yeah.
um I like cellularly see that in my kids, you know, in the way they talk about movies, that they have the same thing, and that's exciting. um Especially my daughter, she totally gets it. She talks about main characters, supporting characters, like you see that and I'm like, I love that. But you know, I came from a narrative, like a fiction background, and I came from acting, and I came from having all these different roles inside of me. And then I go look at documentary, and my favorite filmmakers, a lot of them shoot like it is a fiction film. Like that's what they do. And that's what I was doing with them. And so I don't see like a big dividing line in it in a way.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like a style that's mine there. And I'm like, oh, but I feel better like doing, like maybe I feel some people don't talk to their characters ever and don't ever direct it. They just do a pure verite kind of thing where they just follow these people. And I'm a little different than that. And that's like my style. And I like talk to them and I'm like, what if we did this? Or like give them, you know, and I
Yeah.
like think about it and curate it. And I think that comes from the fiction background. And
And this is
um
for documentary work.
yeah,
Hmm.
and like I think all of the I think it all kind of blends together, and you approach it all and you're pulling from your grab bag. Um I think similar like to raising a kid, you start pulling out of your bag all the lessons you think you've learned. Now, of course, they rearrange all of that, throw it, it's complete abandon chaos. But you're pulling all the things that you've learned and trying to apply it. And it's the exact same thing when you're making a movie, is you're pulling the things out that you've learned. You're like, sometimes like I have a couple teams and I have a couple younger people on the team that are immensely talented and awesome, but they haven't all the experience yet and they haven't had all the opportunities yet. And I'm like, okay, cool. I was like, I do this. I know this works.
Hmm.
This is what the best do. If you want to hit that, this is what you do. This is it. It's inarguable. The proof is there. And it's like I'm trying to do the same thing in terms of I know if you do this,
Yeah.
something, it will yield something, and if you go after it. And I know like, and I of course have my own personal style on all of the movies, all of them, whatever they are. I come from a very like, hey, I'm Gene, this is my story, I'm gonna ask you to share uncomfortable stuff, especially documentary, but I'm gonna be there with you, and like I don't get a pass. And so I hope you trust me, and that is going to cost both of us in a way. Now of course they're in the movie and it's a very different story. I'm not
Yeah.
like, that's a naive thing to be like, oh, share with me, like that's naive. But I try every way possible. Like I'll treat you like I would treat myself or my family, you know.
Hmm.
Like you just find your approach, and I think that works for me.
Yeah. You said something about kind of having younger folks on your team and telling them, like, I've been through this roller coaster, just trust me on this. Where's the line between letting people make their own mistakes and then trying to navigate them down a path that you know is more successful than the one they're heading down? Like, you see them making a mistake, you're like, no, no, let's pivot here, just trust me.
Hmm.
But when do you let them go and make that mistake because that's how you have to learn? coming back to you have to learn from your failures and your successes.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of trust in the team, and I have hopefully a trust in when they go down the wrong path, it will hopefully not be a total disaster and will still yield something. I mean, I think that's what you do when you
Yeah.
hire people,
Yeah.
and that's why people work with the same people over and over because they have that same faith that like
Mm-hmm.
they have the same taste, the same style, the same vision. They like understand what you're going after, and like when they go after other things, they might yield something really fascinating. So I bet on them. Like I bet on them. I mean, I'm not an overbearing director. I mean, I get certainly OCD and dialed on certain things. And I'm like, this must be done this way. Like, inarguably must happen, or else we do not have XYZ. And like, that's the point of this.
Can you give an example of that?
Like, if you just stand in one spot for the whole day, that's not going to be useful to us. That is some other person's movie. There are amazing movies where they do that, but we're not doing that. I don't know. Sound, like, I mean, I have a lot of OCDs about it, where I start thinking about sound and I lose my, I'm like, the sound, like sound mix or sound design.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of them are very personal things too for the, the people I work with.
Well, it's your voice and something you've developed over the course of a long career, as an actor, as a director, as a producer, as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I should say this though. I value all of I like trust them. You have to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing independent about it. You're dependent on your team. Unless you're doing absolutely everything. There's nothing
Yeah.
independent. And of course, I try not to be the person who's like gonna tell them how to do it out of the gate. I like to see them work for a while. I like to see
Mm-hmm.
what especially if you're talking about like a shooter or a producer or a editor, you're banking on their instincts. And even if you need to shape it or guide it, I want to see what their instincts are first and how they do stuff. And then maybe you like start and you like give them a little bit like, hey, I would think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Or think about this when you're in that situation. Or if you just stay there, it limits this. Like start incorporating that and think about. We like share lots of references and like this could be really cool. Let's look at these movies and be like, aim for that for a little while and see where you find the middle ground. And a lot of it is people like the people need opportunities to shine. That's it. Like there is plenty of space for everybody to shine. It's hard to get there, but
Yeah.
you know.
I think you hit it on the head. It's not independent film, it's dependent film
Yeah.
because I think more so in a place where your budget's really tight, your time is tight, you're pouring heart and soul into this. You don't have a lot of support. You have to depend on your team and everybody around you and really make sure you have support to really kind of get the project across the finish line. Which even then when you do, you might need to cut into a short film.
You
Yeah.
still might have to muscle it through and it might
Yeah.
not be fun at all and it might be a lot of lonely hours. I mean, listen, heavy is the head, right? Like you want it, you got to earn it. It is tough and it's a lot of work and like allegedly it's worth it.
Do you feel now, after a pandemic, after NYU, after getting rejected from so many film festivals, and having so many successes, and after everything you've learned, do you think it's worth it?
Well, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't, or I'm just backed into a corner and I don't know how
Yeah.
to do anything else. I mean,
Yeah.
think about, let's reverse it. How long would it take me to get to a spot where I could set the table in any other field?
True.
So it kind of made my
Yeah.
bed. I got to roll with it.
Yeah.
But it's exciting, of course. I mean, I think about a story and everything, and that's exciting. And there's too many. I'm excited. Right now, I have 4 projects that I'm working on,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a shit ton. And it's totally I'm underwater in my brain all the time. But I love all 4 of them. They're different, and it's only 4. And I'm not like nothing else is coming to me because they all need the time and it's
Yeah.
like fine and I'm not playing spaghetti ideas
There's
with
already stuff stuck to the wall.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's exciting and nice and like I can just focus on those and they're all different and so like I'm not having to conjure up ideas and paths for all of them. They all
Mm-hmm.
that's like you spend a lot of time. I was talking to somebody yesterday about like the business versus the art and I was like it's way better to be a business person. There's a lot of artists. There's a lot of artists you never hear about that never get a chance because they don't have any of the business acumen or like they
Yeah.
don't get put in a place to succeed by business people.
A lot of talented artists, and I think through the wonders of social media, well, wonders I put in quotes, we can see a lot more of those folks because they can put their art out there. A lot of amazing singers, photographers, filmmakers that never would have gotten to see the light of day. But now we can. But you're right. They might not ever succeed, even though they're incredibly talented because they don't have the business acumen.
Well, it's just a part of it, and it's something you have to work through. And some people are really like, again, I keep saying like the voice, that your like inner North Star. Some people never just uncover it,
Yeah.
or they chase their tail looking for it,
Mm.
and you cannot control it. It just happens when it happens, and like when it does, it feels so. I mean, assuming it leads to more work and like whatever you value as success and worth, and hopefully you can make a living and doing all that stuff, and obviously chase your wildest dreams, you know, which I mean, like, let's not pretend everybody wants their wildest dreams, but you're very lucky if you get the opportunity to express that voice.
Yeah.
I was talking with like my casting director on this fiction film I was working with, and we were talking about like the hilarity of being typecast, and we were just laughing because he's a genius and he's been in it forever. Shout out Ross Meyerson. And he was like, we're just talking. I said the best phrase, the best part of typecast is cast.
Yeah, because you're working.
Yeah, holy
Yeah.
shit, you got a
Yeah.
niche. People hire you
Yeah.
consistently so much
You're
that
the
they're like,
guy. Yeah.
I want the
Yeah.
Yarrow. I
Like
want the
like
Gino, you know?
the Bruce Campbell. You want Bruce Campbell to do Bruce Campbell things. You know, you want who's the other character actor that's always like in the
Austin
pocket?
Pendleton,
Austin Pendleton, Gene
Bob
Gallerano.
Wallace
Yeah.
Shawn, yeah, like Bob Balaban. Yeah, 1,000. There's a million of them, you know.
Yeah.
Joan Cusack, etc.,
Yeah.
etc., etc.
So I guess the lesson might be is sometimes you don't need a creative pivot. Sometimes you just need to stay in your lane. If you're typecast
You
and
know,
you're
I
working.
heard that phrase a whole lot. Like being a
Okay.
multi,
Yeah.
it was really difficult for me to be. I had a lot of like agents and managers be like, pick a lane and stay in it, and I was like, I can't. I just am too interested, and like I'm not the person who does well being like, I'm just gonna study acting. I mean, I dedicated out. You know, there's a time where I was watching a movie, reading a play a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I put in my hours, and but I'm not the person who can just sit around and wait. It just doesn't
Yeah.
work for me. I get dangerous to myself, you know, and I make bad decisions, and I'm like, it's just not. It's not a great way to. It's not for me, and everyone is different. But I would hear that, stay in your lane. I was like, I just can't do it. I'm sorry, and maybe that cost me. Maybe that cost me. I don't know, but I kept doing it, and eventually, but you know, maybe I hadn't found my lane yet. And right now, I mean, I continue to refuse to pick one. Maybe that's to my demise. I don't know. The
Yeah.
proof is we'll see when I'm gone if it worked or not.
We'll look back at our
Yeah.
careers and at the end of it all and be like, okay, well, that was the lane. But you know what? It doesn't necessarily mean you can't have multiple lanes. You know what I mean? And like you're doing, I think with multi hyphenates in general, you know, we stay in our lane when things are successful, but it doesn't mean that we can't have multiple lanes. You know?
Bruh, we walk the 405, the 101. I change lanes all the time. I hit that HOV when I can. Jay-Z,
Oh,
HOV.
oh
Yeah,
man.
I'll hit it whenever, whatever lane is necessary. Traffic is the problem. You gotta navigate it. And like, as silly as that is, like that is a career. You know, there's a million other things that are in your way. Like, think about everything it takes to get a movie made. There are
Yeah.
1 million dominoes it takes to fall. Let's not even talk. My new thing is like, I tell my teams, I'm like, let's worry about making a good movie.
Mhm.
You know how hard it is to make a good movie? I mean, a good
Yeah.
movie. Anybody watching, like, oh man, that's a good movie. You
Mhm.
know, greatness, sure, of course, always the aim, everything, get my linens ready, you know, but like,
A good
good
movie.
movie
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
really difficult, and takes so many things to come together. And I think that you can't negate that. And like, that's a big part of the whole process, is like, try to get good at what you're doing and see. You know, sometimes you hear like you just weren't good enough, like, or your movie just wasn't good enough, or your audition or your whatever, your stuff, it just isn't good enough. And that is deeply painful. I
It
have
is.
been there. It is
Yeah.
deeply, and especially the arts is so much of you out there in a way, and it feels so personal. It's not like you're
Writing
selling
a
your widget
report. Yeah,
portfolio, you know,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
like,
You're right. A lot of art is just a part of yourself on a paper, on the screen, you know. on stage. It's not fabricated.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reflection of ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think get good. That's what I would say. Is
Make
get
a good
good.
movie.
Just
Find a way to make a good movie.
truly think about
Yeah.
it. It takes so much needs to happen. And that's not to say it's not worth it. It's 100% worth it. It is so much fucking fun to celebrate your movies
Yeah.
when they hit something, and when they like when you're with your team and you guys have made it to the other side, and it gets, of course, like recognition is a huge thing. It's got a lot of tangents to it. It's got a lot of traffic, but like when you get a little bit of that, it's a phenomenal feeling. And like maybe that's chasing the dragon a bit, but look, as the great
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman said, I think he was quoting Laurence Olivier, "Why do we act? Look at me, look at me, look at me."
Yeah. 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 Well, we'll keep making good movies, or trying to make good movies, and until we do, we'll just end up creatively pivoting. Yeah. Gene, thank you so much for coming on again, for chatting with me. We'll see you again next week. We're still got two more weeks left.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the CFA studio for another series of the Anywood podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you find your podcasts, or on YouTube at the Cinematography for Actors YouTube channel. See you next week.
From the CFA network, Cinematography for Actors is bridging the gap through education and community building. Find out about us and listen to our other podcast at cinematographyforactors.com.
Cinematography for Actors Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit. For more information on fiscal sponsorship, donations, because we're tax exempt now, so it's a tax write-off, and upcoming education, you can email us at contact@cinematographyforactors.com. Thanks.